the September briefing session. The first item, we will go around the table and call for you haven't done that already, have you? No. Okay, so any conflicts of interest or material personal interest, go around the table from Councillor Barnes.
I'll be declaring a perceived conflict of interest in item T10.
T10. Councillor Honour.
H1, perceived conflict due to my son making the reports on that. Also, I wish to leave the room on Q1 in relation to Baldwin Swamp due to an independent assessor inquiry. I was clear to that, but I don't want to participate in that.
Councillor Trevor.
Wait a minute. I've got a perceived conflict in relation to Tobin Shortcut Road, the archery group. I have shot archery with them. I'm not a member of their group. And also K1, planning uncompleted works. I wish to leave the room on that because I have uncompleted works on a development of mine. And T1, perceived conflict due to my son making a report in the early stages of the assessment of the resumption.
Thanks, Councillor Honour. Councillor Trevor.
I'll be leaving the room on T10, perceived conflict of interest.
Councillor Limon.
No conflicts.
Councillor Mitchell.
No conflicts.
Councillor Cooper.
Yeah.
Yes, there are no conflicts on K2.
K2, thank you. Councillor Haberman.
No.
And Councillor McLaughlin.
I have a perceived conflict of interest for H1 and T10.
H1 and T10. Mr Mayor.
Nil.
And another one.
Sorry, also a perceived conflict on K2.
K2, okay. All right, sorry, we'll now start the meeting. So the first item is a petition for noting in relation to the bollard at Walkers Point boat ramp. I might just add for councillors' information that I've written to both the Department of Fisheries and Environment and asked them for their thoughts on the request to remove the bollard. At this stage I have received one response from Fisheries but not yet from DES. Any questions on that one? Next item is a financial summary. Welcome, Anthony. Welcome back, Anthony.
Is that working? It'll come on? Okay. So far, from a financial point of view, we're about 17% of the way through the year. To date, some of the things to note is obviously the rates and charges for the first 6 months have been issued and the due date has since passed. With the fees and charges, they're slightly higher at this point in time than what we expected, mainly due to the increased activity in the development sector. So I suppose with the funding for first home buyers and new houses and things like that, we're seeing increased activity there. On the recurrent expenditure side, the depreciation is in line with the budget at the moment, but we will be revising the budget. We had a significant increase in our water and sewage assets, passive assets last year to the 30th of June, and we're expecting up to about $1.5 million increase in depreciation in those business units across those two business units. From a cash point of view, we can see that we're pretty much in line with where we're expected to be at this point in time, although there's a slight dip there if you looked at the graph on, I think it's page 10. And that's probably reflecting the rates that haven't come in this year. We're somewhere around about $5 to $6 million short of where we were in previous years. So on page 11 there, we're just noting that at the date of the report, we had about $50.3 million outstanding, and at the time of the report, there was about $40.6 million in previous years. As at the 21st of the September, we have about $11.4 million outstanding. Compared to 2019, it was around about $6 million, so that's just a latest update there. Not a significant impact on our cash flows at this point in time, and I believe that most of the delay in paying the rates is because we're not charging interest up until the 31st of December. So any questions?
It's my understanding that a number of people have made arrangements to pay by the 31st of December anyway, which equates to quite a significant amount.
Yes, and we've sent out reminder notices and encouraging everyone to contact council and get on to payment terms so that their debts are cleared by the end of December as well. Yes.
The only comment I'll make is it's the second meeting of the new Audit Risk Committee, and they're certainly very thorough, and there's been a lot more questions, I think, asked through this new committee than there was in the previous committee. Happy to move on. Okay, next item is the Bundaberg Region Coastal Hazard Adaptation Strategy. Stuart.
Good morning, Council. Don't know if I need this. Councillors, this report is the culmination of 3 years of work to develop a strategy that guides our future decision making around coastal hazards. The project was a $500,000 eight-stage process that was funded by the state government, and the project has involved extensive stakeholder engagement both internally and externally, with a project control group, a community reference group, a stakeholder advisory group, as well as oversight from a statewide expert review panel.
I just bring to the notice of the Chair that I will be declaring on the day a perceived conflict in this regard.
Bundaberg Regional Council is the second local government in the state to reach this milestone with the CHAS. On behalf of the project manager, Dwayne Honour, and the technical working group, I'm pleased, in fact delighted, to be able to present this report to Council, seeking firstly approval to respond to the public submissions that we received via the public consultation period. Number two is to adopt the Bundaberg Region CHAS and the action plan and release it to the public. And the third point is to release the technical reports to the public as supporting information.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Mr. Chairman, as chair of that community reference group, I'd like to commend everyone that's been involved in it. I think it's been a process of good consultation with the community members. That's led to a report that has now been made available to the general public for comment. I congratulate the state on making the money available because I think it's important to have these types of reports in place. This now leads us to an opportunity to form shoreline erosion management plans underneath this coastal hazard adaptation scheme, and that points us in the right direction when things happen at different time frames. We haven't got to go back doing ad hoc plans here and there. The plan's laid out. It's a trigger-based approach, not a time-based approach. So if nothing happens and everything stays the same, we won't do anything. But if something does happen, this plan gives us the authority to go out there and to be able to do the works it needs doing in the particular area that it needs doing. So I commend it to the council. I also commend the general public and all those that have worked on it. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks. top of the coronavirus cases in Victoria now too. Thank you, Councillor Barnes. A bit of added information.
You know,
Sorry.
okay.
The next item is the two planning items. Richard, are you doing these?
Was that a question
Evan.
or a statement of Greg's?
So the next first item is the amendment to the planning scheme policy for uncompleted works bond.
I'd like to leave the room on this side.
Councillor Honour. Evan, welcome. You don't have to sing.
Morning all. Morning all. I won't sing. The current item is a proposal to amend Council's planning scheme policy for development works, and it's primarily to improve and clarify Council's requirements for bonding, particularly bonding uncompleted works. So this has been driven by some concerns with the development industry that with the increased home building resulting from the government grants, that there's likely to be an increase in, we have been seeing an increase in subdivision works, and this change would clarify the requirements for developers looking to bond uncompleted works, which would allow early sealing of a survey plan prior to those works being completed. So the proposal is that the amended planning scheme policy go out to public consultation and then will be brought back to council for adoption after the consultation period.
Thanks, Evan. Comments or questions? No? Thank you. Yep. We'll just wait till Councillor Honour in, Councillor Cooper out.
You need a doorkeeper.
Morning, councillors. Item K2 deals with a development application for material change of use on land at 41 to 49 Childers Road, Brannion. The development application itself is a material change of use for a service station for both truck stop and regular passenger vehicles. There's driver facilities associated with the activity, a fuel shop and selling ancillary goods, food and drink sales including a drive-through. There's a car wash with 2 automatic bays and 2 manual bays, 18 car parks, 10B double truck parks, and signage associated with the use. And the hours of operation are from 5 a.m. till 10 p.m, 7 days. As related in the report, councillors have noted there's a background section that details some of the changes that have occurred through the application and assessment process since it was lodged with council back in July 2018. Originally, the proposal was lodged over 7 lots, 3.3 hectares in area, and had land, including land fronting Paradise Lane. Council issued an information request in February 2019, particularly raising concerns about some of these sensitive land uses, the residential land uses surrounding the site, and requested some further information from the applicant in that regard. The applicant, in response, removed a single lot that was fronting Paradise Lane and modified some of the service station building locations and the fuel bowser location. The proposal that was resubmitted is Figure 2 in the councillor report, and this was the application that went to public notification in March 2019 that the community looked at. Queensland Treasury is a referral agency for Department of Transport and Main Roads matters, provided a referral response to the application, noting Childers Road is a state-controlled road, and approved the access location and considered traffic safety matters subject to conditions. In December 2019, Council went out to the applicant for further or outstanding matters, requesting further details regarding the noise impacts for the development, and also asking some questions about the zoning of the land and how the use was compatible with the anticipated development that was intended to occur around the site over time. After this request, the applicant commissioned an acoustic report, and there was a further modification to the proposal, removing the second allotment, adjoining the first that had been removed, and again altering the layout of the service station and the shop. The acoustic report also recommended some acoustic treatments or walls to be put into place, and that represented the third change to the application. So that's the request, figure 4 of the councillor's report that we're actually dealing with today. In terms of the site description, so we're looking at a 5 lots being involved in the development now, 2.3 hectares in area. The site's located on the western side of Childers Road, and it's bounded to the north and west by emerging community zoned land that's predominantly being used for residential dwellings on large lots. The Bundaberg Airport's located on the opposite side of the road, and there's some industrial land on the opposite side of Crook Street to the south. Councillors will note that the detailed assessment of the application starts with a review of the planning scheme, and particularly the strategic framework around settlement pattern and the emerging community zone. The Branyan area itself is identified as a major urban expansion area within the planning scheme, and there's a commentary that it'll be focused on accommodating regionally significant levels of growth for the community. So as such, there's a commentary that's not to be developed for urban purposes until such time as further investigation into the suitability of the land be undertaken and the structure planning is done by the council. In the interim, it's supposed to be protected from land fragmentation and encroachment from establishment of uses that might compromise or make it more difficult to reach that target for a growth area for urban purposes. So the interface between different land uses becomes more important, and residential uses in the locality are proposed to be protected from encroachment from incompatible uses. Applications or development applications are prohibited from being submitted in the zone, but in the absence of that local planning, the council and the community have a heightened interest in ensuring that development doesn't make it harder for the growth areas to develop for their intended purpose over time. In terms of the emerging community zone itself, the council will note that there's within the report that the zone is focused on establishing effectively integrated and existing communities and interconnected communities. So it's not intended to be used for standalone type developments. It's supposed to be integrated and creating a community for the future residents in that area. And of some concern with this particular proposal is that the 7,000 square metres of land that's been excluded fronting Paradise Lane creates a fragmentation of that land and a bit of a gap of which there's no application lodged over, and a question about how that land might be used into the future. At its highest level, the planning scheme strategic planning intent for the Branyan identified growth area can't be met by this proposal because the local planning hasn't been undertaken for the site, and that's discussed within the report. As detailed in the report, it's the views of assessing officers that it's not integrated with the existing community and proposed to serve the Branyan major growth area, but more broadly serve the passing traffic in and out of Bundaberg, and that there's a view that there's sufficient land in other areas that are better suited to that purpose. Councillors will note there's a discussion about need in the proposal, and there's a discussion in the planning scheme that service stations of this type and scale would regularly locate in industrial zoned areas or commercial zoned areas or rural zoned areas, and this site doesn't meet that criteria. It's also noted that there's an existing and established service station as well as an approved and yet to be constructed service station within 1.2 kilometres of this site, in the vicinity of Airport Drive and Twyford Street. There was no economic assessment demonstrating that there was a need for the development in that regard. And some broader thinking might be that truck traffic after the development of the ring road was to be orientated external to the ring road boundaries, and that the site might be better located either on the ring road or external to that boundary so that truck transport isn't coming within the boundary. And there's a commentary within the planning scheme about that as well, that talks about service stations of this scale being preferred to be located a minimum 15 kilometres from other service stations of that type and away from existing residential, planned residential areas. Amongst other discussions within the report, Council also note there's a heavy focus on the amenity impacts of the development, and the Council officers through the assessment had actively encouraged the applicant to provide an acoustic report at the time of pre-lodgement. We requested it again at the information request stage and it wasn't provided. It was only after the outstanding matters correspondence from Council that the requested acoustic report was provided, and that was a source of some criticism from the community as they reviewed the public notification that there hadn't been a close regard given to acoustic matters and impacts. There's a bit of a summary from the acoustic report that the review that Council's technical expert provided of the submitted acoustic report. There was an initial review and then a supplementary review with some refinement, but there's still fundamental challenges with accepting that this proposal can locate in this area as it's presently proposed and not cause those off-site impacts that we're trying to avoid. And there's a bit of a summary of some of the impacts, particularly around the trailer-mounted refrigeration units on the B-double trucks or other trucks in the parking areas, and suggested underestimation of noise impacts associated with that aspect of the proposal. So the conclusion from the noise expert was that it not only presents an impact to existing residents that are surrounding the area or sensitive uses and a potential nuisance risk, but also has an effect on the development of that adjoining land if they were to establish for a sensitive land use or a residential land use into the future. Infrastructure is discussed, and there's water and sewer connections available to the site, but they're individual connections. DTMR, as I said, through the referral agency process, has approved the access and the traffic safety aspects of the proposal, so there's no particular issues with access and traffic safety from the referral agency perspective. Car parking can be dealt with through conditions of approval, and estimations of assessing officers and stormwater can be dealt with as well. Landscaping would be something that would have to be significantly altered, noting the acoustic report suggesting that the 4-metre high acoustic walls are inadequate. Councillors, there's a public notification section to the report. It details the comments that we received from 58 properly made submissions, 56 properly made submissions back in March 2019. They all objected to the proposal for varying reasons, but a lot of those reasons aligned with the officers' concerns around the lack of local planning for the area and that the proposal represented a risk or concern to the amenity of that area. So that's detailed in the report for the officers to have a look at. Taking all those things into consideration, councillors, the planning recommendation is that the proposal be recommended for refusal, and the grounds of that recommendation are provided in the report for your consideration.
Thank you, Richard. Comments or questions? Councillor McPhee.
I just have a couple of questions. Thanks, Richard. Did the developer participate in a pre-lodgement meeting?
Yep, through the chair, yes, there was a pre-lodgement meeting.
Yep.
Yes.
And just one other question. When, in relation to the referral to the state agency, they only look at the traffic aspect of the development, don't they? They're not looking at the overall development when they give it a tick. It's just the access onto that main road that it meets.
And through the chair, the primary focus is traffic safety and access, and the manoeuvring, I suppose, impacts to the state road network. There are some considerations left and right of that in terms of noise impacts for certain uses around traffic matters on the state road.
Yeah, thank you.
Just for clarification, Richard, I think the question was, were Main Roads the only referral agency? There was no other state referral agencies?
Through the chair, yes, Department of Transport and Main Roads were the referral agency.
Thank you.
Other questions? Comments? No? Thanks, Richard. Councillor Cooper back.
Good morning, councillors.
Christine.
I've got item 01 here, which is in regard to a lease of part of Tobin Shortcut Road to the Gin Gin Field Archers. The Field Archers have been working with Council's Property and Leasing Officer to locate a site which is suitable for them for their club activities. The property that Council has there is freehold land. It is known as Tobin Shortcut Road Recreational Reserve, but it is actually owned, that property, by Council as freehold. The proposal is for Council to enter into a 10-year lease with the Field Archers at Council's standard community rate of $55 inclusive of GST per year, and the other remaining terms will be on the standard community lease. And it's proposed that the exception in the local government regulation is applied, given that the disposal of the land is to a community organisation.
Thanks, Christine. Comments or questions? No?
If you could just please, Mr. Chairman, have the yellow area explained on the map. The blue area is the reserve, as I understand it. The yellow area next to it, or the orange area there.
So of the land that's proposed to be leased to the Field Archers, this is obviously the whole parcel of the land. The lease area will be this portion to the Field Archers. That will be under a licence arrangement so that both groups can use that area, and this is a proposed lease to the Rural Fire Brigade.
And will the access to that orange area be for the public as well? Because the public do come in there sometimes and use that little facility and the toilet block.
Yeah, that area there, that's in the licence area, is open to the public.
Right, thank you.
Thanks, Christine. No other questions? No? Next one is also a lease, Christine.
Yes, item 02, this is for a proposed lease. So this is the other part for that site, which is the change in area for the Queensland Rural Fire Brigade. So at the moment, the Fire Brigade does already have an existing lease at the site, which is due to expire in the next couple of years. The lease area, you can't see it on the map, but it was this portion of land here. And for some reason, I'm not sure on the history, but the building is actually being built outside of the lease area. So it's proposed to rectify that, and they were requiring extra space. So it's proposed to enter into a new 10-year lease for the Rural Fire Brigade on the standard community lease, and in this instance we'll be seeking that Council apply the exception in section 236 1B1, given that it's disposal of land to a government agency.
Any questions? No?
In the relation, Mr. Chairman, to the Fire Brigade's tenure there, I understood there was a survey in place. Does that have to be resurveyed?
Yes, the area will need to be resurveyed because at the moment the building's outside of their current survey area. So to appropriately deal with it and have the risk transferred to the lessee and them responsible for their site, their lease area will need to be changed, which will require a new survey plan to be prepared.
Other questions? No? Thank you. The next item is also a lease. Councillors might recall that when we were doing our site inspection of the Botanic Gardens, this matter was raised by Wendy Driver, and this is now to finalise that matter.
Yep, so this is a proposed lease to the Bundaberg Steam Tramway Preservation Society. The lease area is proposed to be slightly altered, but when you alter a lease area, you can't actually just do an amendment to the lease. It requires a surrender and a new lease to be entered into. The site, you can see here, this presently where the dotted line is presently where the lease area ends. So they're just sort of squaring off the lease area. It's proposed that the lease be for a term of 10 years and that council apply the exception in the local government regulation, given that the disposal of the property is to a community organisation. At the same time, councillors will remember we were talking about the railway track. That will also be amended at the same time, but given that that arrangement's actually a trustee permit, not a trustee lease, it won't require council to apply an exception because there's actually no disposal under a permit, there's only disposal under a lease term.
Thanks, Christine. Any questions on that one? No? Very good, thank you. The next item is the Baldwin Swamp Environmental Park Management Plan Amendment. I might just point out that Councillor Mitchell has proposed an alternate motion for this, which after Gavin makes his report we might discuss, if that's okay.
I wish to leave the room on this too, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Morning, councillors. As the CEO mentioned, the item I'm dealing with is item Q1, which is the Baldwin Swamp Environmental Park Trust Land Management Plan Amendment. So the reason it's amendment is that council had previously in July 2018 adopted the Baldwin Swamp Environmental Park Trust Land Management Plan. It hadn't been registered with the state at that point in time because the feedback we had from the state was that the land management plan had proposed to include a number of freehold lots and also land which wasn't part of the environmental reserve. And you can only have a trust management plan when the tenure of the land is firstly suitable, so freehold land can't be part of a reserve. Similarly, reserves for other purposes can't be enrolled into an environmental reserve. So as a result of that, we've had to amend the plan and propose to remove the freehold parcels from the land and also those reserves, such as park and reserve for park and recreation, have also had to be removed because they don't comply with the environmental reserve components of this land management plan. So a fair bit of work has gone into this. Effectively what we're saying is that the recommendation is that the council firstly approve the amended plan. Secondly, that we reflect the fact that those parcels of land that aren't appropriately tenured are removed from the site, so from the plan, so effectively those freehold parcels including the reserve parcels, and that despite that fact we would still ensure that we have ongoing management and maintenance of those freehold parcels that are close to or adjoining the environmental reserve, bearing in mind the fact that some of those don't necessarily have environmental values. We have a caretaker house on one of those, for instance, and some associated sheds for machinery, which we use obviously to maintain the environmental reserve, but those parcels themselves don't have any environmental value per se. So there's a slight change to what was put in the recommendation, where we removed the about protecting the environmental values of those parcels and just talked about improve the ongoing management and maintenance of those parcels. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Gavin. Councillor Mitchell, do you want to discuss your proposed amendment or?
Yes, thank you. My proposed amendment to the recommendation is just for detailing mostly that the parcels that are getting removed, so that there's no historical ambiguity from one version of the plan to the current version, because it's difficult to locate historically sometimes documents, and I just wanted to have those parcels.
Councillor Mitchell, have you got your mic on? Right.
I do.
Just have to move it up a bit.
Yes, I do.
That's it.
So I'm just recommending that all of the parcels be listed as having been removed, which ones they are, and a slight change to the last paragraph as well, where it maintains the environmental values. A reference. Did you want me to read my recommendation in its entirety, or?
I think we're in agreement at staff level with your recommendation, with some tweaking of the environmental values, mainly because a couple of those parcels Gavin mentioned have sheds on them. and we were just concerned about the use of that word with what weren't really pristine lots. So perhaps between now and the ordinary meeting, if we can work with you for an alternate motion and then distribute that.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I am happy if there's been further review of the properties and what's actually on them and the removal of the environmental values comment. But there will be ongoing management and maintenance. However, yes, I'm happy to discuss the first point of listing all of the properties that are going to be removed from.
Well, I think Gavin gave me an email yesterday, which I hadn't had time to discuss with you, but I think that'll probably keep
Thank you very much.
everyone at the middle ground.
Thank you very much, Mr. CEO. Thank you, Gavin.
Other questions or comments? Okay, well, we'll distribute that proposed recommendation once we've discussed it further with Councillor Mitchell and Gavin. We need Councillor Honour back. Okay, now we have Councillor Honour back. That concludes the open part of the briefing session. We have a number of matters to discuss in confidential, so we'll stop the live streaming.